Hi there, welcome to my course on Spring Boot. In this lesson, I'll show you how to create a simple web application using Spring Boot. In my previous lesson, I gave a brief introduction on Spring Boot and showed you how to create a simple Hello World REST controller using Spring Boot. For a quick recap, for developing any Spring Boot application using Maven, we need to add Spring Boot starter parent in the parent section of the POM. Spring Boot has several starter modules. For developing a web application, we need to add a dependency Spring Boot starter web. What this does, it automatically adds all the libraries needed for developing a Spring web application, thus making it very easy and quick to develop a Spring web application. Also, all the libraries that are used are based on the version specified in the parent section. So what that does, it reduces or actually there is no chance of any incompatibility between the libraries because they're all based on one version. So next we will be creating a startup class needed for any Spring Boot application, and that is annotated using Spring Boot application. It has a main method and that has Spring application run to start up the application. We will create a web application named question bank. The use cases for this application are going to be listing a set of questions maintained in the database, and also adding new questions, viewing existing questions, deleting or updating existing questions. For implementing the application functionality, we will create a question controller which will be a REST controller, and it will have methods to list all existing questions, create new questions, get an existing question, update or delete an existing question. We'll go to Eclipse next so that we can take a look at the code. So I have the Spring Boot Maven project, and let's take a look at the POM file. So the POM, as I mentioned in the parent section, it has Spring Boot starter parent specified. I have added a dependency to Spring Boot starter web, which gets all the libraries needed for developing Spring web application. We can take a quick look at that in the dependency hierarchy. So in the dependency hierarchy, we can see that it added Spring Boot starter Tomcat, starter validation, Jackson Database, Spring Web, and Spring Web MVC. So all the libraries needed for developing a Spring Web application. Next, we're going to look at the question controller. So the question controller, it's a REST controller with a request mapping API version 1. And so this is going to implement all the use cases needed by the question bank application. So it has methods to list all the questions, create, get, update, and delete. Let's take a quick look at what the question data is. So question has these data elements. It has an ID, it has a subject, question description, and an answer. Question controller, the list method has a request mapping questions. It's a get method, and it's going to show all the questions, all the existing questions. Create is also mapped to questions, but it's a post, and it gets the question data in the request body. Get has path variable ID and gets the data for a specific question ID. Update uses request method put and updates an existing question. Delete gets the ID in a path variable and uses request method delete. So for now, I'm using a question stub because the database, like when the database is not set up and you don't have a repository, so you could use a stub to to take care of all the data requirements of the application. So question stub, what it does, question stub is maintaining all the existing questions. So it has some about 4 questions maintained in the static section. It has methods to get a list of all the questions, create any new question, get an existing question, update or delete. And it does that while the application is running, so it just stays in the memory while the application is running. Next, so we have all the classes needed for this web application present. So we can, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start. So I'm going to start this application in the debug mode. So debug as Java application. So now our Spring Boot application is running it with the embedded Tomcat on port 8080. So we can next go to the browser and try to invoke some of the RESTful methods from the browser. So if I go here and if I just visit the URL with questions, so it's getting me, it's returning a JSON, data with all the existing questions. I can even put a breakpoint on the list method just to show you that this REST controller is actually being invoked. So if I refresh again, you'll see that it has stopped at this breakpoint. So it has invoked the list method in the REST controller, and if I continue, it's going to go back and get all the JSON data. Next, I can get the data for a specific question. So if I put 1 there and hit enter, so it got it again hit the REST controller and it got the data for question 1. Now, in order to develop the real views for the application, I have done that. So they are all under source main resources public views. So all HTML files, and it's using AngularJS, which is, I'm going to cover that the AngularJS in a different lesson, but that is what it is using to for developing the UI for this question bank application, and internally it's invoking all the REST controllers. So here is the question bank UI. So this page is listing all the questions. If I refresh this page, it went to called the list method, and it's trying to get all the questions. And if I continue, so it got me the list of all the questions. I can try to add a new question. So I can add, the subject is going to be Spring Boot. It could be any subject, but I'm choosing Spring Boot. And then I can add a question, what is the default embedded server? As we know, the answer for that is Tomcat. And if I put a breakpoint in the create method just to show you that it's there. So now if I hit save, it's going to call the create method. So all the question data, came over to the REST controller. And if I continue, it's going to save that question. Yeah, you can see that this new question that we added, what is the default embedded server, that has been added to our in-memory question stub data. If I click on delete, it's going to delete the new question that we added. And if I refresh, you'll see that question is gone. So what we did in this simple web application is, so we created a REST controller which implemented all the methods needed for implementing the use cases in the question bank application. So in this lesson, I showed you how easy it is to create a web application quickly using Spring Boot, just by setting up the dependencies in the pom.xml, and then all the libraries, were automatically added, and we could focus on just developing the REST controller. So if you want to, hope you enjoyed the course, or rather this lesson. To get more details regarding the lesson, you can go to my website, prudentstream.com, and go to the Spring Boot page. So there you'll be able to see all this details, and also there will be a link to download the code. Hope you enjoyed the lesson, and look forward to talk to you again in a subsequent lesson. Thanks for watching.